very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a real pleasure to follow the very passionate member for East Lothian, and I couldn't agree more with him. And there are a lot of similarities despite representing such different constituencies, because in Hornsey and Wood Green we have far too many people who are doing it tough this winter and stuck on these dreadful prepayment meters where the standing charges seem to change overnight without any advice, and where the tariffs are particularly high. And the member for East Lothian, and indeed members across the House today, have emphasised the social inequity of this situation. In beginning my few words, I would like to pay tribute to the Chief Executive of the Citizens Advice Bureau in my constituency, Mr David Blake, and all of his volunteers who do an enormously positive job to help people in their hour of need, and also to my constituency caseworkers and all of those throughout this House who work tirelessly day and night to assist our constituencies when they have no hot heating or hot water or electricity, because these things are happening increasingly commonly, despite the fact that we have had sub-zero temperatures for at least 10 days now. I also wanted to pay tribute to the member for Southampton Test, who is about to reply for the opposition on this, and his team, who do an excellent job in briefing MPs on the situation on prepayment meters, and who are trying to research and provide up-to-the-minute advice for our constituents. I broadly wanted to mention the dreadful customer service, and I offered to assist my constituency caseworker with some work this week because she was rather snowed under. It took 55 minutes for Eon to pick up the phone, and I think this is probably what a lot of our constituents are experiencing, because they're at the bottom of the pile, they don't get heard. And other constituents have written to me telling me that they've not yet received their energy rebate vouchers. Since October, my constituents should have been receiving their £66 per month to help with soaring bills, and yet they haven't had any help. One of my constituents told me, "I've been trying to get my voucher with no success. I've tried calling British Gas several times. I've been on the phone for hours, but no one picks up. I have no other way to tell them that I have tried. I am now worried I will lose this voucher. We are entering December now." And this in sub-zero temperatures. I've written to the energy companies about this, and I'm still awaiting a response. This is the MP letter, the MP hotline also failing to respond on time. We know that some of the most vulnerable people in our society use prepayment meters, and many having to pay more for their heating and pay back any debt. In fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think the cost of energy is just an issue for those who are on prepayment meters. I noticed in yesterday's press that there's even an MP who is feeling so out of pocket that he's had to claim over £3,000 to IPSA because he's not able to afford his energy bill. So this is obviously something which is affecting a great many people, but I would imagine that with us, with our income, we're in a slightly better position than others. I won't mention this person's name because I haven't checked with his office, but I believe that this is a wide-ranging issue facing many, many in society. But the people that we should be worried about in terms of the public health implications, as the member for York has said, and also, as others have mentioned, is of course people who either cannot reach their prepayment meter to adjust it, or who indeed have got significant disabilities. Now, I do look forward to hearing what the Minister says about the vouchers, because it's been very well covered in the press, and I do hope that it's been the subject of discussions with the private companies, because I know that he traditionally has been a great champion of consumers, and I hope he hasn't lost that zeal since he's got into the bureaucracy. I'm sure he hasn't. I'm sure he's just as passionate. I'm sure he's listening to the introductory speech from the Honourable Member from Glasgow, and will be taking immediate action this afternoon so that we can all go and have our Christmas break, knowing that our constituents will not be left at Christmas and New Year with suppliers who fail to pick up the telephone, with MP staff who are pulling their hair out because they're not getting replies through the MP hotline, or indeed standing charges which flip up without any advice at all. As many will be aware, energy prices have soared in the last year, and one constituent told me it's impossible to understand how families will manage to find thousands of pounds extra a year, and the anxiety throughout the country is almost palpable. My private sector rent will go up significantly, and I will almost certainly have to move as a result. People on prepayment meters have to pay a daily standing charge, as I have said, and the electric and gas costs are significantly higher. Just to give one example from a text I received, £12 for a 20-minute use of hot water for 4 young students who are trying to survive, have their showers, get themselves ready for their studies. 12 minutes for 20 minutes, extrapolated over a 12-month period, that of course is over £4,300 just for gas which powers the heating. This is clearly completely unacceptable and desperately needs an urgent review. I'm extremely concerned, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the high cost of prepayment meters, as we have covered fully in this debate, and the impact of this on our constituents. One other constituent told me, I'm a single pensioner living alone and I'm honestly scared by what I'm reading on my prepaid meter. Prices aren't going to come down in the future, they'll only rise. What is being done to help our pensioners, many of whom are in damp and cold homes all day? We saw tragically the loss of the life of a tiny child to damp and cold in the last month. And this is the kind of situation which we must redouble our efforts to put more pressure onto the energy companies so that they can take immediate action for those most vulnerable on these prepayment meters, paying over the odds and in advance for energy that they haven't even used. Of course.
I'm very grateful to her for giving way. She's making some excellent points, and this debate is incredibly important, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is why I signed the original motion. Does she agree with me that paying about 2% more, which I think is estimated at £84 between October and December, is absolutely the wrong way to go for people who are already in arrears and need help with their bills, not paying more?
He's absolutely right to emphasise that point, and the member for Gloucester, who lives on that very cold plain, the Gloucester plain, which can get very chilly, of course, and snowy at this time of year, will understand the desperate anxiety that many are feeling who are in these situations. And I do hope that the Minister will take urgent action on that, because it's not one of these situations where it's just people in one part of the country which are affected. It's often people in privately rented accommodation and having prepayment meters which are just literally taking all the money that they have. The other point I briefly wanted to mention in closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, was the inherited debt problem, and some of the members here will be aware of this. When a tenancy changes over, new tenants move in and they inherit the debt from the tenants who were there before. And in some cases, they put their £10 in thinking that will keep me going for a couple of days, not realising that they're carrying the debt of the tenants before. That then, of course, disappears. They then find themselves having to put in £50 or £60, which they may not readily have accessible to them as new tenants with all the costs that go with a new tenancy, and then having to find that they then have to negotiate with a completely new provider. So there has to be a way of regulating more, of really getting the regulator to be much more proactive and to be much more agile in these situations, so that we don't have these inherited debt problems, and that new tenants do not have to suddenly find hundreds of pounds just so that they can switch on their heating. So I hope that the Minister, in his closing remarks, will be able to mention what happens with this inherited debt problem. And one further practical difficulty that I wonder if he could comment on is where a supplier changes. So in one particular constituency case I'm aware of, npower was the provider. It was a different owner of the prepaid meter. Then along came E.ON as the new provider. There was a period there where the service was very disrupted. Eventually E.ON got on top of the inherited mess from npower, but the constituents and the tenants were having a really difficult time with basic information. So what can be done to clarify the information and the explanation for the enormously costly standing charges and unit cost prices which are currently being charged to those in the most vulnerable housing in the UK? Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
SNP spokesperson.